I discovered my laptop was missing from my front porch on a Tuesday afternoon in September, and that's when everything started to unravel in the Sunridge Meadows community of Henderson, Nevada. My name is Brandon Daniels, and I had been living in this planned community for 3 years without major incident. The neighborhood was one of those cookie-cutter developments that sprouted up outside Las Vegas after 2020, with beige stucco houses that all looked vaguely Mediterranean, and an HOA that seemed to exist primarily to fine people for having their trash cans visible from the street. I worked from home as a software developer, which meant I ordered a lot of things online. Usually, deliveries went smoothly. The community had a central mailroom for packages, managed by our HOA, which seemed convenient at first. The laptop was expensive, a custom-built machine I needed for work, worth about $3,000. When the delivery notification popped up on my phone that afternoon, I immediately walked down to the mailroom, which was located in a small building near the community center. The mailroom was supposed to be staffed during business hours, but when I arrived at 2 in the afternoon, it was locked. A handwritten sign taped to the door said back at 3 p.m. I waited around for a bit, checking my phone. The tracking information from the shipping company clearly stated that my package had been delivered and signed for at 1:47 p.m. Someone had accepted my delivery. I took a screenshot of the tracking page, feeling the first flutter of concern in my stomach. When 3 o'clock came and went with no one showing up, I walked back home and called the HOA office. A woman named Patricia answered, sounding harried and distracted. HOA office, this is Patricia. Hi, this is Brandon Daniels from 4782 Sandstone Drive. I'm trying to pick up a package that was delivered today, but the mailroom is closed. Oh, Susan must have had to step out. She'll be back. The sign says 3 and it's already 10 past. Patricia sighed audibly. I'll send her a message. Was there anything else? Can you check if my package is there? It's a large box, should have been delivered around 2. I heard typing on the other end. I don't have access to the mailroom inventory from here. You'll need to check with Susan directly. This was already more complicated than it needed to be. When will she be back? I really can't say. Is there anything else I can help you with? There clearly wasn't, so I thanked her and hung up. I tried the mailroom again at 4, at 5, and at 6. Each time it remained locked, the same handwritten sign mocking me from behind the glass door. That evening, I called the shipping company directly. After navigating through their automated system, I finally reached a human being named Marcus. I'm showing here that your package was delivered at 1:47 p.m. local time, Marcus confirmed. Signed for by S. Reynolds. Who is S. Reynolds? That's the signature we have on file for the delivery. I don't know anyone named S. Reynolds. Can you tell me exactly where it was delivered? More keyboard clicking. The mailroom at your community address. The driver noted handed to mailroom attendant in the delivery notes. So Susan Reynolds was the mailroom attendant. At least now I had a full name. The mailroom has been closed all afternoon. I can't get my package. Sir, once we have a confirmed delivery with a signature, the package is considered successfully delivered. You would need to take that up with your mailroom. I knew arguing wouldn't get me anywhere. Can you at least send me a copy of the signed delivery receipt? I can email that to you, yes, sir. The email arrived 20 minutes later. The signature was an illegible scrawl, but the printed name underneath clearly read S. Reynolds. I saved the document and tried to decide what to do next. The next morning, I was at the mailroom at 8:30 when it was supposed to open. The lights were off, and the door was locked. I waited until 9, growing increasingly frustrated. Finally, at 9:20, A silver Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot, and a woman in her mid-50s got out, carrying a large coffee cup from Starbucks. She had short blonde hair and wore a floral print blouse. "Are you Susan Reynolds?" I called out as I approached. She looked startled, nearly spilling her coffee. "Yes. Can I help you?" "I'm Brandon Daniels. I've been trying to pick up a package that was delivered yesterday. The mailroom was closed all afternoon." Susan's expression shifted to something defensive. "I had a personal emergency. I put up a sign." "I understand, but my package was delivered at 1:47 p.m. and you signed for it. I need to pick it up." She unlocked the door and went inside, and I followed her. The mailroom was small, with rows of locked mailboxes on one wall and several shelves for larger packages. Susan set down her coffee and looked around vaguely. "What did you say your address was?" 4782 Sandstone Drive. "It's a large box, a laptop." She walked along the shelves, scanning the packages. "I don't see it here." My stomach dropped. "You signed for it yesterday. The shipping company sent me the receipt." "Well, if it's not here, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe it wasn't delivered." "It was delivered. You signed for it. S. Reynolds, at 1:47 p.m. yesterday." I pulled out my phone and showed her the email with the delivery receipt. Susan barely glanced at it. "I signed for a lot of packages. If it's not here, maybe someone already picked it up." "How could someone pick it up? It's addressed to me." "Do you have anyone else on your account? A spouse, a roommate?" "No, I live alone. And even if I did, the mailroom was locked all afternoon and evening." Susan's face was getting red. "I don't appreciate your tone. I'm telling you the package isn't here." "Then where is it? You signed for it." "Maybe the driver made a mistake. Maybe it was delivered somewhere else." This was going nowhere. "Can I speak to your supervisor? I'll file a report about the missing package. That's all I can do." "Who is your supervisor?" "That would be Patricia at the main office, but she's going to tell you the same thing I am." I left the mailroom feeling angry and confused. Back home, I called the shipping company again and explained the situation. They opened an investigation, but the representative warned me it could take up to 10 business days. I also filed a police report for the missing package, though the officer who took my information over the phone didn't sound optimistic. "If it was delivered to the mailroom and signed for, that's a civil matter, not a criminal one," he explained. "You'd need to take it up with your HOA. "What if someone stole it? Do you have evidence of theft?" I didn't, not yet. I thanked him and hung up, feeling the walls closing in. $3,000 was a lot of money, and I needed that laptop for work. Over the next 2 days, I called the HOA office repeatedly. Patricia kept telling me she would look into it, but nothing happened. I sent emails to the general HOA inbox, which went unanswered. I even tried going to the HOA office in person, but it was only open limited hours, and I kept missing them. On Friday, frustrated and running out of options, I decided to do something that felt slightly crazy but also necessary. The shipping company had given me the exact GPS coordinates where the package had been scanned as delivered. I pulled up the tracking information again and looked at it more carefully. The package had been scanned at 1:47 p.m. at the mailroom. That much was true. But there was another scan I hadn't noticed before, later in the day. At 6:23 p.m., there was a scan labeled "In Transit Redirect." I called the shipping company again and asked specifically about that scan. "Let me check that for you," the new representative said. Her name was Jennifer, and she sounded more helpful than the others I had spoken to. "Okay, yes, I see that scan. That's unusual." "What does it mean?" "It means the package was scanned again after initial delivery, which shouldn't happen. Let me check the GPS coordinates for that second scan." I waited, my heart beating faster. That's very strange, Jennifer said. The second scan shows a different location. It's still in your community, but it's not the mailroom. Can you give me the address? I'm not supposed to give out specific addresses, but let me see what I can do. More typing. The GPS coordinates put it at 5234 Desert Vista Court. Does that mean anything to you? I pulled up a map of the community on my computer and searched for that address. When I found it, my mouth went dry. 5234 Desert Vista Court was the home of Gerald Winters, the president of the Sunridge Meadows HOA. Are you sure about that address? I asked Jennifer. I'm reading the GPS coordinates, and that's where they placed the package at 6:23 p.m. on Tuesday. Can you email me that information? I can send you the tracking details, yes. The email arrived a few minutes later, and I studied it carefully. There it was in black and white. My package had been scanned at the mailroom at 1:47 p.m., and then again at Gerald Winters' house at 6:23 p.m. I sat back in my chair, trying to process this. Gerald Winters was the HOA president, a position he had held for the past 5 years. He was a real estate agent in his early 60s, with silver hair and a politician's smile. I had seen him at community meetings, always dressed in expensive suits, always ready with a firm handshake and a rehearsed speech about property values and community standards. Why would my package have been scanned at his house? The answer seemed obvious, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe he had been helping out at the mailroom. Maybe the GPS was wrong, but the more I thought about it, the less sense any innocent explanation made. Susan Reynolds had signed for my package at the mailroom. Then, several hours later, it had been scanned at Gerald Winters' house. The most logical explanation was that someone had taken my package from the mailroom and brought it to his house. I needed more information. I decided to check the tracking for my other recent deliveries. Over the past month, I had ordered several packages, all delivered to the community mailroom. I pulled up the tracking numbers and checked each one. Most of them showed normal delivery patterns. A single scan at the mailroom, and that was it. But 2 other packages showed the same strange pattern as my laptop. Both had been scanned initially at the mailroom, and then hours later, they had been scanned again at different locations. I pulled up the GPS coordinates for those second scans. My stomach tightened as I mapped them out. One package had been scanned at Gerald Winters' house. The other had been scanned at a house on Cottonwood Lane that belonged to Sharon Mitchell, according to the community directory. I looked her up. Sharon Mitchell was the HOA vice president. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a pattern. I sat at my computer for a long time, trying to decide what to do. I had evidence that my packages were being redirected to the homes of HOA board members, but I didn't know why or how to prove theft. The packages weren't necessarily at those addresses anymore. The scans just showed they had been there at some point. I needed to find out if other people in the community were experiencing the same problem. I logged into the Sunridge Meadows community Facebook group, which had about 200 members. I wrote a post. Has anyone else had problems with packages going missing from the community mailroom? I've had several deliveries that showed as delivered but weren't available when I went to pick them up, trying to figure out if this is a widespread issue. I posted it and waited. Within an hour, I had a dozen responses. Yes, I thought I was going crazy, had 3 packages disappear last month. Same here. HOA kept telling me to file a claim with the shipping company. I complained to Susan at the mailroom, and she told me I must have already picked it up and forgotten. Like I wouldn't remember picking up a $500 espresso machine. The comments kept coming. More than 20 people reported missing packages over the past 6 months. Some were small items, but others were expensive. Electronics, jewelry, designer clothes. One person estimated they had lost over $2,000 worth of merchandise. "We should report this to the police," someone suggested. "I already did," another person replied. "They said it was a civil matter." I read through all the comments, taking notes. Then I sent private messages to the people who had reported the most significant losses. I asked them if they could send me their tracking information. By Saturday evening, I had tracking details for 15 missing packages from 8 different residents. I spent hours going through each one, checking the GPS coordinates for any unusual scans. The pattern was undeniable. Every single package that had gone missing showed the same strange behavior. An initial scan at the mailroom, followed by a second scan hours or days later at one of 3 addresses. Gerald Winter's house appeared the most frequently. Sharon Mitchell's house was second. The third address belonged to a house on Sagebrush Circle, which I discovered was owned by Carol Farrington, the HOA secretary. The 3 top officers of the HOA board were systematically stealing packages from the community mailroom. I felt sick as the full scope of it became clear. These were people who were supposed to be serving the community, managing our dues, and maintaining our shared spaces. Instead, they were running what amounted to a theft ring, using their access to the mailroom to steal from their neighbors. I needed to document everything carefully. I created a spreadsheet with all the information: the resident's name, the package contents, the tracking number, the initial delivery scan at the mailroom, and the secondary scan location. The pattern was so clear that even someone without technical knowledge could see it. But I still needed more proof before I could take this to the authorities. The GPS scans showed the packages had been at those locations, but that wasn't quite the same as proving they had been stolen and were still being kept there. On Sunday morning, I decided to drive past Gerald Winter's house. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. His house was in the nicer section of the development, one of the larger models with an extended garage. As I drove slowly past, I noticed his garage door was partially open, maybe 2 feet off the ground, as if it had gotten stuck. I parked down the street and walked back, trying to look casual, like I was just out for a stroll. As I got closer to his house, I could see into the garage through the gap at the bottom of the door. What I saw made me stop in my tracks. The garage was full of boxes. Not just a few boxes, but dozens of them, stacked along the walls and piled on shelves. Even from a distance, I could see shipping labels on many of them. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in with the camera, taking several photos. My hands were shaking as I walked back to my car. I had just photographed what looked like evidence of a major theft operation, and I had done it on the HOA president's property. If he caught me, he could accuse me of trespassing or worse. But I had the photos. I scrolled through them, zooming in on the images. Several boxes clearly showed shipping labels with addresses in our community. One box, partially visible behind others, had a label I could make out: 4782 Sandstone Drive. My address. I drove home and immediately backed up the photos to multiple locations: my computer, cloud storage, and an external hard drive. Then I sat down and wrote a detailed report of everything I had discovered: the missing packages, the GPS tracking data, the pattern pointing to the 3 HOA board members, and the photos of the boxes in Gerald Winter's garage. The question was what to do with this information. I could go to the police, but based on my previous interactions with them, I wasn't confident they would take it seriously. I could confront the HOA board directly, but that seemed dangerous. They had already shown they were willing to steal from their neighbors. What else might they do to protect themselves? I decided to start by reaching out to a lawyer. I found a local attorney who specialized in HOA disputes and property law, a woman named Rachel Cortez. Her website said she offered free consultations, so I called and left a message explaining briefly that I had evidence of theft involving my HOA board. She called me back Monday morning. "Mr. Daniels, I got your message. Tell me what's going on." I explained everything, from my missing laptop to the tracking data to the photos of the boxes in Gerald Winter's garage. Rachel listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "This is serious. If what you're saying is accurate, we're talking about organized theft, possibly mail fraud, abuse of fiduciary duty, and who knows what else. Can you help me?" "I can, but we need to be strategic about this. The first thing you need to do is file a formal complaint with the Nevada Real Estate Division. They oversee HOA governance in the state. The second thing is to report this to the postal inspector if any of the stolen packages were sent through USPs. What about the police? We'll get to them, but we need to build a strong case first. Do you have access to any HOA financial records?" "No, they don't share those with regular homeowners. They're supposed to. Nevada law requires HOAs to make financial records available to members upon request. I want you to submit a formal written request for all financial records for the past 2 years, including bank statements, credit card statements, and receipts." "Will they actually give them to me?" "They're legally required to. If they refuse, that's another violation we can use. But my guess is they'll comply, at least partially, because refusing would be too obvious a red flag." Rachel walked me through exactly what to include in my request letter. We scheduled a follow-up call for later in the week, and I hung up feeling like I finally had a plan. I spent the rest of Monday morning drafting the request letter according to Rachel's specifications. I sent it via certified mail to the HOA office, with copies to all 3 board members at their home addresses. I also sent a copy to Patricia at the management office. Then I filed a report with the Nevada Real Estate Division through their online portal, attaching all my documentation: the spreadsheet of missing packages, the tracking information, the GPS data, and the photos from Gerald Winter's garage. I explained the pattern and provided contact information for the other affected residents. The postal inspector was next. I discovered that stealing mail or packages is a federal crime, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service takes it seriously. I filed a report online, again attaching all my documentation. Only 2 of the stolen packages on my list had been sent via USPs, but the inspector's office confirmed they would investigate. By Monday evening, I had set multiple official processes in motion. All I could do now was wait and see what happened. The response came faster than I expected. On Tuesday morning, I received an email from Patricia at the HOA management office, copying all 3 board members. The email was terse. "Mr. Daniels, we have received your request for financial records. The board will review your request at the next scheduled meeting on October 15th. The board is not required to provide records immediately and may take up to 10 business days to respond after approving the request. Additionally, the board reserves the right to charge reasonable copying fees for any documents provided." It was a stalling tactic, I realized. October 15th was 2 weeks away. They were buying time. But I also received another email that afternoon, this one from an investigator named Robert Chen with the Nevada Real Estate Division. He asked if I could speak by phone at my earliest convenience. I called him immediately. "Mr. Daniels, thank you for calling back so quickly. I've reviewed your complaint and I have to say, this is one of the most well-documented cases I've seen in a while. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I had all the facts straight. You did good work here. I'm going to open a formal investigation into the Sunridge Meadows HOA board. I'll need to interview you in person and get statements from the other affected residents. Can you provide their contact information? I sent him the list of names and numbers I had collected. Robert explained that the investigation would take time, but that the evidence I had provided gave them a strong foundation to start from. One thing I should warn you about, Robert said. Once word gets out that there's an investigation, the board may retaliate. They might try to fine you for violations, restrict your access to community amenities, or make your life difficult in other ways. Document everything. Every interaction, every letter, every email. If they do retaliate, that's another violation we can add to the list. Understood? Also, I'm going to reach out to local law enforcement and recommend they open a criminal investigation. What you've documented here goes beyond HOA mismanagement. This is theft, and it needs to be treated as such. After I hung up with Robert, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Things were moving forward, but I also knew I had just declared war on the HOA board. These were people who had power in the community, who controlled access to shared resources, who could make my life miserable if they wanted to. That evening, I got a taste of what was coming. I found a letter in my mailbox, an official notice from the HOA. It informed me that I was in violation of community rules for creating a disturbance in the community Facebook group, and for making false accusations against board members. The letter demanded I remove my Facebook post immediately and issue a written apology to the board, or I would be fined $500. I took photos of the letter and sent them to Rachel. She called me within the hour. This is retaliation, plain and simple. Don't remove the post, don't apologize, and don't pay any fine they try to levy. This actually helps our case. They're proving they're trying to silence you for reporting their wrongdoing. Can they keep fining me? They can try, but those fines won't hold up in court. And every fine they issue is more evidence of retaliation. Let them dig their own hole. I felt slightly better, but that night I barely slept. I kept thinking about everything that could go wrong, about how much this was going to cost in legal fees, about whether I should have just let the laptop go and moved on with my life. But then I thought about all the other people who had been stolen from, about how Gerald Winters and his cronies had been abusing their positions for months or maybe years, and I knew I was doing the right thing. Wednesday morning, I woke up to find that someone had left a pile of dog feces on my front porch. I didn't own a dog. I cleaned it up, took photos first, and added it to my documentation folder. Thursday, I received another fine notice, this time for failure to maintain front yard landscaping to community standards. My front yard looked exactly the same as it had for the past 3 years. I photographed the yard from multiple angles, showing that it was identical to most of the other yards on my street, and sent everything to Rachel. "They're panicking," she said when I called her. "This is actually good for us. It doesn't feel good." I know, but trust me, they're making mistakes. Every piece of retaliation is something we can use. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay, angry mostly." "That's normal. Just keep documenting everything and don't engage with them directly. Let me handle the communication." On Friday, something happened that changed everything. I was working at home when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find 2 men in suits standing on my porch. The older one, who was probably in his 50s with a neat gray beard, held up a badge. "Mr. Daniels." "I'm Detective Mike Stevens with the Henderson Police Department, and this is Detective Chris Moore. We'd like to talk to you about some missing packages." I invited them in, my heart pounding. Detective Stevens explained that they had been contacted by both the Nevada Real Estate Division and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service about my complaint. They had reviewed the evidence and decided to open a criminal investigation. "We'd like to go through everything with you from the beginning," Detective Stevens said. "We need to make sure we have the timeline right and understand exactly what you've documented." I spent the next 2 hours walking them through everything. The missing laptop, the tracking data, the pattern of secondary scans at board members' houses, the other residents who had reported missing packages, the photos of the boxes in Gerald Winter's garage. Detective Moore took extensive notes while Detective Stevens asked questions, probing for details and clarifications. They were thorough and professional, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like someone in authority was actually taking it seriously. "This is solid work," Detective Stevens said when we finished. "We're going to need to conduct some interviews and possibly execute search warrants. Are you willing to testify if this goes to trial?" "Absolutely." "Good. I have to warn you, investigations like this can take months. The DA will need to review everything before deciding whether to file charges, but based on what you've shown us, I'd say there's a strong case here." "What about the retaliation I've been experiencing? The fines and the harassment?" Detective Moore looked up from his notes. "Document everything like you've been doing. If it escalates to threats or physical harassment, call us immediately. What they're doing is probably witness intimidation, which is a separate crime." After the detectives left, I felt energized. Real law enforcement was involved now. This wasn't just a civil HOA dispute anymore. This was a criminal investigation. The following week was relatively quiet. I received no new fine notices, no new harassment. The HOA seemed to be lying low. I wondered if they knew about the police investigation yet. I got my answer on Thursday, October 10th, when I received an email from Patricia. It was brief and formal. "Dear Sunridge Meadows residents, please be advised that an emergency board meeting has been called for Saturday, October 12th at 10 a.m. in the community center. All residents are welcome to attend. The agenda will include discussion of mailroom security procedures and other community matters." I forwarded the email to Rachel, Detective Stevens, and Robert Chen. Rachel called me immediately. "You should go to that meeting," she said. "I'll come with you. They're probably going to try to do damage control, maybe announce some changes to deflect attention." "Do you think they know about the investigation?" "Oh, they definitely know." The detectives would have started interviewing other residents and possibly approached the board members for statements. They know the walls are closing in. Saturday morning, Rachel picked me up at 9:30, and we drove to the community center together. The parking lot was packed, with cars lining the street. Apparently, word had spread, and everyone wanted to see what was going to happen. Inside, the main meeting room was set up with rows of folding chairs facing a long table where the board normally sat. Every seat was taken, and people lined the walls. I recognized many faces from the Facebook group, residents who had reported missing packages. At exactly 10 o'clock, the board members walked in through a side door. Gerald Winters looked composed, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a navy suit. Sharon Mitchell, the vice president, was a thin woman in her late 50s with severe features and a burgundy blazer. Carol Farrington, the secretary, was younger, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked nervous. Gerald called the meeting to order and launched into what sounded like a prepared statement. "Thank you all for coming on short notice. The board wanted to address some concerns that have been raised about mailroom operations. We take the security of your deliveries very seriously, and we've been conducting an internal review of our procedures." Someone in the audience shouted, "What about the missing packages?" Gerald's smile tightened. "We're aware that some residents have reported missing deliveries. We believe this is primarily due to miscommunication and tracking errors by shipping companies. However, to prevent any future issues, we're implementing new procedures. Starting next week, all package deliveries will be logged with a timestamp and photo documentation." "That doesn't explain where the packages went," another person called out. "If you believe you have a missing package, please file a report with the HOA office, and we'll assist you in filing a claim with the shipping company." I felt Rachel's hand on my arm, holding me back. I had been about to stand up, but she shook her head slightly. A woman in the front row stood up. I recognized her from the Facebook group. Her name was Jennifer, and she had lost over $1,000 in missing packages. "Mr. Winters, I filed 3 reports with the HOA office over the past 2 months. No one ever helped me file claims with any shipping company. I was told it was my responsibility to follow up." "Are you saying that was a lie?" Gerald's expression flickered with irritation before he recovered his composure. "I apologize if our staff didn't provide adequate assistance. That's part of what we're addressing with these new procedures." "I have a question," said a man near the back. "Why were packages being scanned at board members' home addresses after they were delivered to the mailroom?" The room went absolutely silent. Gerald's face went pale, then flushed red. Sharon Mitchell was staring at her hands. Carol Farrington looked like she might cry. "I don't know what you're referring to," Gerald said, but his voice had lost its confidence. The man held up his phone. "I have tracking data showing my package was scanned at the mailroom, and then 3 hours later it was scanned at an address on Desert Vista Court. That's your address, Mr. Winters. Why would my package be at your house?" The room erupted. Multiple people started talking at once, some demanding answers, others sharing their own experiences with missing packages. Gerald tried to call for order, banging a gavel on the table, but no one was listening anymore. Rachel stood up, and her voice cut through the chaos. "My name is Rachel Cortez, and I'm an attorney representing multiple residents of this community who have been victims of package theft. I'm here to inform the board and all residents that a criminal investigation is currently underway involving the HOA's mailroom operations. I strongly advise the board members not to make any statements without consulting their own legal counsel." The room went quiet again. Gerald was standing now, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "This meeting is adjourned," he said abruptly. "You can't just adjourn the meeting," someone shouted. "We want answers." "This meeting is adjourned," Gerald repeated. He turned and walked toward the side door, Sharon and Carol following him quickly. But before they could leave, the main doors at the back of the room opened, and Detective Stevens walked in, followed by Detective Moore and 2 uniformed officers. "Gerald Winters, Sharon Mitchell, Carol Farrington, please stay where you are," Detective Stevens said, his voice carrying across the room. The 3 board members froze. The room was completely silent now, everyone watching. Detective Stevens approached the table. "We have warrants to search your properties in connection with an investigation into theft and mail fraud. We're not arresting you at this time, but you need to come with us so we can execute these warrants. You have the right to have your attorney present during the search." Gerald found his voice. "This is outrageous. You're making a terrible mistake." "You're welcome to consult with your attorney," Detective Stevens said calmly, "but the searches are happening today." I watched as the 3 board members were escorted out of the community center, surrounded by police officers. The room erupted again, everyone talking at once, but I just sat there feeling a strange mixture of vindication and exhaustion. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. "You did it. You actually did it. We don't know what they'll find in the searches." "Oh, they'll find something. People like this always think they're too smart to get caught. They get sloppy." The searches took place that afternoon. I wasn't there to see them, but Detective Stevens called me that evening with an update. "We found significant evidence at all 3 properties," he said. Winter's garage had over 100 packages, many of them unopened, some opened with the contents still inside. "We found shipping labels matching the addresses of victims in your community. Mitchell and Farrington's houses each had several dozen packages as well. What happens now?" "The DA is reviewing everything, but I can tell you we're recommending charges of theft, mail fraud, organized retail crime, and abuse of fiduciary duty. These are serious charges, Mr. Daniels. They're looking at significant prison time if convicted." "How much time?" "That depends on a lot of factors, but given the scope of what we found, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking several years." Over the next few weeks, the story exploded in the local media. The Las Vegas Review-Journal ran a front-page story about the HOA package theft ring, complete with photos of boxes being carried out of Gerald Winter's house. Local TV stations picked it up, and suddenly reporters were calling me for interviews. Rachel advised me to be careful about what I said publicly, but I did give one interview to the Review-Journal, explaining how I had tracked my missing laptop and discovered the pattern of theft. The story went viral on social media, with thousands of people sharing it and commenting about their own HOA horror stories. The Nevada Real Estate Division moved quickly. Within 2 weeks of the searches, they issued an order removing all 3 board members from their positions and banning them from serving on any HOA board in the state. They also initiated proceedings to place the Sunridge Meadows HOA under temporary state supervision while new elections were organized. The criminal case moved more slowly, as these things always do. Gerald Winters, Sharon Mitchell, and Carol Farrington were all formally charged in November with multiple felonies. They each hired expensive defense attorneys and initially pleaded not guilty. In December, an emergency election was held to fill the vacant board positions. 3 new members were elected, all of them residents who had been vocal about demanding accountability and transparency. One of them was Jennifer, the woman who had confronted Gerald at that final board meeting. The new board's first action was to hire a professional management company to run the mailroom and implement proper security procedures. They also commissioned a full audit of the HOA's finances, which revealed that Gerald had been funneling HOA funds into personal accounts for years. That led to additional charges of embezzlement. My laptop was eventually recovered from Gerald Winter's garage. It had been opened and used, which infuriated me, but at least I got it back. The police returned it to me in January, along with several other packages that had been stolen from me. Some of the items were missing or damaged, but I filed claims with my insurance and the shipping companies, most of which were eventually paid. The other victims had mixed results. Some got their packages back, some got partial reimbursement, and some got nothing. In total, the police estimated that over $75,000 worth of merchandise had been stolen from the community mailroom over an 18-month period. The criminal trial finally began in March. I was called as a witness and spent 2 days on the stand, walking through how I had discovered the theft pattern and documented everything. The defense attorneys tried to poke holes in my testimony, suggesting that GPS tracking wasn't reliable and that I had jumped to conclusions, but the physical evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutors had the packages recovered from the searches. They had shipping records. They had testimony from Susan Reynolds, the mailroom attendant, who broke down on the stand and admitted that Gerald had pressured her to let him borrow packages for quality control checks. They had financial records showing unexplained deposits into the defendant's bank accounts. They had text messages between the three board members discussing which packages to take and how to avoid detection. Carol Farrington broke first. In the middle of the trial, she accepted a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Gerald and Sharon in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony was devastating. She explained in detail how the scheme had worked, how Gerald had started small by taking just a few packages here and there, and how it had escalated over time into an organized operation. According to Carol, Gerald would check the mailroom delivery logs and identify valuable packages based on the sender and package size. He would either take them himself or have Susan set them aside for him. He would then scan the packages with a handheld scanner he had purchased, which created the GPS tracking data that had led me to discover the pattern. He apparently thought scanning the packages at his house would somehow protect him legally, creating a paper trail that showed he had received the packages for inspection. The hubris was staggering. He had created the very evidence that had led to his downfall. Sharon Mitchell maintained her innocence throughout, claiming she had thought Gerald was legitimately testing mailroom procedures and had no idea the packages were stolen. The jury didn't buy it. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on multiple counts against both Gerald Winters and Sharon Mitchell. Carol Farrington was sentenced as part of her plea agreement. The sentencing hearing was held in May. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Rachel and several other victims. The judge heard statements from multiple residents about how the thefts had affected them, not just financially but emotionally. People talked about feeling violated, about losing trust in their community, about the stress and frustration of dealing with missing packages and an unresponsive HOA board. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it brief. I talked about how a missing laptop had led me to uncover systematic corruption and theft, and how disappointed I was that people who had been entrusted with serving the community had instead chosen to exploit that trust for personal gain. The judge was clearly angry. She called the defendant's conduct a profound betrayal of fiduciary duty and a systematic scheme to defraud and steal from the very people they were supposed to serve. Gerald Winters was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. Sharon Mitchell received 4 years. Carol Farrington, as part of her plea deal, received 2 years with the possibility of early release. All 3 were also ordered to pay restitution to their victims, which totaled over $80,000 when you included the costs of the investigation and legal fees. They were also permanently banned from serving in any HOA governance role. Susan Reynolds, the mailroom attendant, was charged with lesser offenses as an accessory. She ultimately received probation and community service, and she was fired from her position. The new HOA board made it clear she would never work for them again. In the aftermath, life in Sunridge Meadows slowly returned to normal, though with significant changes. The new board was committed to transparency and accountability. They published monthly financial reports, held open meetings, and created a community oversight committee to prevent future abuses. The professional management company they hired ran the mailroom with strict security protocols, including video surveillance and detailed logging of every package. The community Facebook group, which had been where I first realized the scope of the problem, became much more active. People were more engaged with HOA governance, asking questions, attending meetings, and holding the board accountable. In a strange way, the scandal had brought the community closer together. As for me, I became somewhat infamous in the community as the guy who took down the HOA board. Some people treated me like a hero, others seemed uncomfortable around me, as if they worried I might investigate them next. I tried to just go back to my normal life, working from home and keeping to myself, but I also learned some important lessons from the experience. I learned that documentation is everything, that persistence matters, and that sometimes doing the right thing means making yourself unpopular. I learned that corruption can happen anywhere, even in a suburban HOA, and that people will abuse power if they think they can get away with it. I also learned that GPS tracking on packages is more detailed than most people realize, and that shipping companies keep records of every scan. That information had been the key to unraveling the whole scheme. In June, I received a letter from the Nevada Real Estate Division, thanking me for my role in exposing the fraud and helping to protect other homeowners in the state. They said my case had led them to implement new oversight procedures for HOAs and to create a task force focused on preventing similar abuses. I also received thank you notes from several neighbors who had been victims of the theft ring. Jennifer, who had been elected to the new HOA board, stopped by my house one evening with a bottle of wine. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I know this wasn't easy for you, and I know you took a lot of heat for speaking up, but you did the right thing, and I'm grateful." We sat on my porch and talked for a while, sharing stories about our experiences with the old board and our hopes for the future of the community. It was the most connected I had felt to a neighbor since moving to Sunridge Meadows. The lawsuits continued for months after the criminal trial. Multiple residents filed civil suits against Gerald, Sharon, and Carol, seeking additional damages beyond the criminal restitution. The 3 defendants also faced lawsuits from shipping companies for fraud. Gerald's real estate license was revoked by the state, ending his career. By the end of the year, all 3 were serving their prison sentences. Gerald and Sharon both tried to appeal their convictions, but the appeals were denied. They would serve their full sentences, minus whatever time they earned for good behavior. I sometimes wondered what had driven them to do it. Was it greed? Entitlement? Some combination of both? Gerald had been a successful real estate agent. He wasn't hurting for money, but maybe that was the point. Maybe he just felt entitled to take whatever he wanted, confident that his position of power in the community would protect him. The whole experience changed how I thought about HOAs. I had always found them annoying, with their petty rules about trash cans and lawn height. But I had never really thought about the power dynamics involved, about how much control a small group of people can have over a community, and how little oversight there often is. I became an advocate for HOA reform, testifying before a state legislative committee about the need for stronger oversight and accountability measures. Some of my recommendations were incorporated into new legislation that passed in the following session, including requirements for regular financial audits and more stringent background checks for board members. I also started a blog about HOA issues, sharing my story and collecting stories from others around the country who had dealt with corrupt or abusive HOA boards. The blog became surprisingly popular, and I found myself becoming an accidental expert on HOA governance and homeowner rights. Looking back now, more than a year after finding that first "back at 3 p.m. sign on the mailroom door, I'm still amazed at how much came from one missing package. If I had just accepted the loss and moved on, Gerald Winters and his accomplices would still be stealing from their neighbors. Dozens more people would have been victimized, The corruption would have continued, but I didn't move on. I got angry and I got stubborn, and I decided to figure out what happened to my laptop. That decision led to uncovering a major theft ring, criminal convictions, prison sentences, and real reforms that would protect other homeowners. It's a strange feeling, knowing that my refusal to let go of a $3,000 laptop had such far-reaching consequences. Sometimes, I think about alternate timelines where I just filed an insurance claim and bought a new laptop and went on with my life. Those timelines are probably quieter, less stressful, more peaceful. But in those timelines, Gerald Winters would still be the HOA president, still stealing packages, still abusing his position. In those timelines, Carol Farrington and Sharon Mitchell would still be enabling him. In those timelines, all those other victims would never get justice or restitution. So I'm glad I live in this timeline, even though it was difficult and stressful and sometimes scary. I'm glad I followed the tracking data, glad I took those photos, glad I documented everything and reported it to the authorities. I'm glad I didn't give up when the HOA tried to retaliate, when people told me to let it go, when it seemed like nothing would ever happen. The last time I saw Gerald Winters was at his sentencing hearing, watching him being led away in handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, no longer the confident HOA president with the silver hair and the politician's smile. Just a man who had made terrible choices and would spend years paying for them. I felt no particular satisfaction in that moment, no sense of victory. Just a quiet certainty that justice had been done, that the system had worked, that accountability had been enforced. And maybe a small hope that other HOA board members in other communities might think twice before abusing their positions, knowing that they could be caught. That evidence leaves digital trails. That one persistent homeowner with a missing package could bring down an entire corrupt administration. My life in Sunridge Meadows is quiet now. I still work from home, still order packages online. But now when I go to the mailroom to pick them up, there's a professional staff member there and video cameras and a detailed logging system. My packages arrive and wait for me securely until I can pick them up. The system works the way it always should have. Sometimes new residents in the community recognize my name and ask if I'm the guy from the news stories. I usually just smile and say yes and leave it at that. The story has become part of the community's history, a cautionary tale about corruption and accountability that gets told to new homeowners when they move in. The lawsuit settlements started coming through in the fall, about 18 months after the original searches. Gerald, Sharon, and Carol had been ordered to pay restitution, but they had also lost civil suits to multiple residents. Their assets were being liquidated to pay the judgments. I received a check for the full value of my stolen laptop, plus additional damages. It wasn't about the money at that point, but it felt like a final closing of that chapter. I deposited the check, and then did something that felt right. I donated a significant portion of it to a legal aid organization that helps homeowners fight abusive HOAs. If my experience could help other people stand up to corruption in their own communities, then something good would come from all of it. Life goes on in Henderson, Nevada, in the Sunridge Meadows community. The houses still look vaguely Mediterranean. The HOA still sends out reminders about trash and visibility. People still complain about the monthly dues. But there's a difference now. A sense that residents are paying attention, that the board is accountable, that corruption won't be tolerated. And every time I see a package notification on my phone, I think about that Tuesday afternoon in September when my laptop went missing, and about the long chain of events that followed. One missing package, one persistent homeowner, one pattern of GPS scans that didn't make sense. That's all it took to bring down an entire corrupt HOA board and send 3 people to prison. That's all it took to recover over $75,000 in stolen merchandise and implement reforms that would protect thousands of homeowners. That's all it took to prove that accountability matters, that evidence matters, that one person speaking up can make a difference. I still live in Sunridge Meadows, still in the same house on Sandstone Drive. I probably always will. This is my community now, for better or worse, and I played a role in making it better. That means something. And if another HOA president somewhere else decides to start stealing packages from the mailroom, I hope there's another homeowner like me who notices the pattern, who documents everything, who refuses to let it go until justice is done. Because that's how we make our communities better. One exposed corruption at a time, one accountability measure at a time, one stubborn homeowner at a time. The story of the Sunridge Meadows package theft ring has been told and retold in news articles and blog posts and community meetings. But for me, it will always be the story of how I lost a laptop and found something more important. Proof that regular people can stand up to corruption and win, that the truth will come out if you're patient and thorough, and that sometimes the smallest injustice can reveal the largest crimes. My laptop sits on my desk now, the same one that was stolen and recovered. I could have bought a new one with the insurance money or the settlement, but I kept this one. It reminds me of what happened, of what I uncovered, of why documentation and persistence matter. Every time I turn it on and start work, I think about Gerald Winters sitting in a prison cell, about Sharon Mitchell and Carol Farrington serving their sentences, about all the packages that will never be stolen because the system has been fixed. And I think about all the other homeowners in communities across America who might be dealing with similar corruption. And I hope they find the courage to speak up, to investigate, to demand accountability. Because in the end, that's what this story is really about. Not packages or GPS tracking or HOA boards, but about refusing to accept injustice, about following the evidence wherever it leads, and about believing that the system can work if good people are willing to push it to work. That Tuesday afternoon when I couldn't find my laptop, I had no idea what I was starting. I just wanted my package back. But by the time it was over, I had taken down a theft ring, sent 3 people to prison, recovered tens of thousands of dollars in stolen property, and helped reform HOA oversight laws in Nevada. Not bad for a software developer who just wanted his laptop back. The sun is setting over Henderson as I finish writing this account, the desert sky turning those brilliant shades of orange and purple that make Nevada sunsets famous. Tomorrow I'll go back to my regular work, writing code and attending virtual meetings and living my normal life. But I'll always carry this experience with me, this knowledge that ordinary people can expose corruption and demand justice. And if you're reading this because you've had packages go missing from your HOA mailroom, or because your HOA board seems to be acting suspiciously, or because you just have a feeling that something isn't right, I hope my story gives you the courage to investigate. Document everything, follow the evidence, and don't give up. You might be surprised what you uncover, because sometimes justice starts with one missing package, one curious homeowner, and one GPS scan that shows up at the wrong address. That's all it takes to change everything.